All right, the August 14th meeting of the Park Committee will come to order. We'll note that Alderman Burnett, Alderman Johnson, Alderman Weary are present, and Alderman Nicholson is excused. Can I have an approval of the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Johnson, second by Alderman Burnett to approve. Any changes? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item C, approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Johnson, second by Burnett. Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Under regular business, number 1, consideration with possible action on the approval of a collaboration agreement with the Friends of Bay Beach Wildlife Sanctuary, Inc.
So I guess the first thing I want to mention is we did amend the agenda yesterday, so there's a few other items on here that weren't on here last week. But this item was all on there last week. So the Friends of the Wildlife Sanctuary, or otherwise known as the Fowls, they've been in existence for many years out at the sanctuary. They are an official 501c3 nonprofit entity. And historically, all donations that they received does go back to the wildlife sanctuary to not only fund capital improvement projects, but also offset operational expenses. So there is also another committee called the Guild. They are a subcommittee of the Fowls or the Friends. The Guild fundraises also through different events and other sources of fundraising. And all of their funding goes towards animal care rehab. So that's where they put their money into. So all of the main buildings at the sanctuary were previously all funded by the Fowls in their fundraising campaigns. So what you see out there now probably wouldn't be in existence without the support of the Fowls. Most recently, as you know, the Fowls just completed a $3.1 million fundraising campaign for the 4K expansion to the Nature Center, and that'll be opening up soon. So I think, like I said, it's fair to say that without their financial assistance, we wouldn't be able to operate the sanctuary the way we currently do. So when the donations come in, they come in several different ways. They either mail them directly to the Fowls in their P.O. box, or people will mail checks to the sanctuary itself, to our Nature Center. And when the checks come in, they come in as they're either written out to the Wildlife Sanctuary, the Friends of the Wildlife Sanctuary, or the Guild. And to most people, they don't understand that there's a difference between the official nonprofit entity and the City of Green Bay or the Wildlife Sanctuary. They're just donating as a whole to the program and the facility. Throughout the history, since the Friends have formed, historically, all of the checks, whether it was written out to the Guild, the Friends, or the Sanctuary, all went to the 501c3 group of the Fowls. So that's historically how it's always been handled. And then staff works very closely with the Fowls and the Guild to determine what the priorities of that funding is. And then they will then disperse the funding back to the sanctuary to do different projects. Either it's a capital improvement project. We recently, the Guild just funded a freezer for our deer storage. So, they're very helpful. But they've been in existence we do have somebody here from the Fowls, for many, many years. And really, though, there is no agreement out there in place that authorizes the city to give the wildlife sanctuary checks to the Fowls to kind of keep the same practice that we've been doing. So we did work with the law department, we did work with the Fowls, and we came up with an agreement which you had attached to your agenda packet. And really that just spells out the procedures of how the money is dispersed and would allow city staff to funnel those donations that come in to the Fowls. So what we're doing is not necessarily changing anything. This is how it's always historically been done. We just had nothing in writing solidifying it. So really the other purpose of the document is as people change, whether we get new city staff, a new park director, new superintendent, new members on the Fowls, there's a document in place where people can point to and say, okay, this is the correct procedure of how we go about it and what needs to be provided to the city and what the city has to provide to the Fowls. So like I said, we're not really changing anything, we're just putting it in writing. There is a member of the Fowls who's here to talk, and if you have any questions for him, he's This is Dan Spielman. He's the president of the Fowls.
Good afternoon.
Could I just get your name and
Sure,
address?
Dan Spielman.
Actually, could I get a motion and a second to open the floor?
Motion to open the floor.
Motion by Alderman Johnson, second by Alderman Burnett to open the floor. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
All yours.
Before I get into the agreement, I do want to invite you all to the dedication of the new building, which is August 27th at 2 p.m. I don't know if you've been out there to take a look at the new building, but it's very impressive. We're very pleased with what's happened. We've had a good working relationship with the city. Keller Construction's done a nice job, and I hope you can come out and see it, and I think it's a real addition. As Dan said, we've raised $3.1 million in private money, which hopefully will cover will cover everything in construction, including a great deal of equipment for the new building. Turning to the agreement, again, we have no staff, we pay no employees. We basically, every dime that we have or earn or receive goes to the betterment of the wildlife sanctuary. We've dealt with the new docks and new pier and a variety of other things. So in other words, this money is going to be used specifically for the wildlife sanctuary moving forward. We do have some outstanding bills on the construction because we have pledges coming in over the next several years. Some of our major donors are paying over 5 years. So the money that comes in will be used to basically, as it comes in, to pay off the debt and also to fund programs. We talked with Dan about what things the wildlife sanctuary needs, what they'd like to see us do, and we basically try to do that. So we think this arrangement is a good one. We are willing to provide the information in the agreement that the city needs, and we're hopeful that it's approved and we can go forward.
Thank you, sir. Any questions?
I have a couple. I guess I've reviewed the agreement with some interest because I've served on other organizations that have comparable situations where you have a foundation supporting a different entity. And honestly, there were a couple things that struck me as odd about this agreement, and I just wanted to maybe ask you about them. So one is, does the city staff have an ex officio role on your board of directors?
Yes, the park superintendent, who always attended all of our board meetings and basically was our liaison with the city. In the future, it'll be Dan until the park superintendent, at least my understanding, until that position is filled.
Okay, and I noticed that. And I mean, wouldn't it, and I'll maybe save that question for Dan. So currently right now, I mean, when payments come to you, you guys you take them in, you manage them. You're a 501c3 foundation, I presume?
Right.
I mean, I guess when I look at the agreement and we're telling you to maintain your records according to IRS regulations, it seems that we're telling you to do something that you should already be doing, but.
Well, we are.
And that's my question. I mean, you're doing that, there's no concerns with the way that you're maintaining your
We
accounting
just got
processes?
audited.
Okay.
We passed the audit with flying colors. Because of the nature of fundraising, we'll probably be audited on a more regular basis, but we have had no problems with the IRS or anybody else.
Okay.
Or the state.
I guess one thing that struck me maybe is odd, and I would like to get your feedback on this, is the request by the city to have you turn over a list of all of your donors and the amount that they've donated.
No, I don't think it says quite that. I think it says information as to where the money is going to go, what the purpose of the, but I don't think the intent is to, for example, with the capital campaign, we are not providing any of the donor information on the capital campaign. And in discussions with Vanessa and City Attorney's Office, because we did discuss this, I think the idea was that, specific donor information on names and stuff do not have to be turned over.
Okay, so when I'm reading this, and just correct me if I'm wrong, it says all donations received, you have to turn this over, on a
Which
quarterly
page?
basis. All
Alderman-
donations received, including the
Alderman
total.
Johnson, what page are you on, just so?
Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like page 2.
Oh, correct.
Item B, under reporting, number 1. All donations received, including the total amount of the donation, to whom the donation was written out to, or otherwise directed, the address where the donation was submitted, and whether the donations were earmarked for any particular purpose by the donor.
That does not include, at least in the discussions with Vanessa, that does not include, because I specifically raised that does not include the donor's name.
It's, when it says to whom the donation was written out to,
Okay?
was it written out to the city of, or to the wildlife sanctuary, or was it written out to the Friends?
Okay.
So it's just clarifying who the check was written to, not who it's from.
Okay. So you find that reporting process to be acceptable to
Yes.
your organization?
Yes.
Okay. I'll have some questions for Dan, after that, but
I mean, in all candor, the city representative is going to know most of this information anyway, because they're going to be at our board meetings where we talk about what donations have come in, what the money's going to be used for. So to me, it's somewhat, it's not a huge issue.
Okay. Can you explain the operation of your board a little bit to me? Does it operate independently but in conjunction with needs for the park?
Yeah, I mean, what has happened traditionally, I've only been on the board, well, it's been 5 years now. But basically what happens is we meet quarterly. Every meeting we will have a treasurer's report. We have a treasurer who's an accountant and does a very nice job of keeping the records. Then basically we'll have in the past it's been Mike Reed giving a report as to what's happening at the wildlife sanctuary. Then we will have a request for where money could be used, things that the wildlife sanctuary needs. The board then discusses them. Sometimes they approve them. Most of the time they are approved, assuming that it's something we want to do, and assuming we have the funds to do it. And that's generally how it works. With this campaign, 4 years ago, the board decided that we would go forward to expand the 4K program, build this new 13,000 square foot building, and basically embarked on a capital campaign, which basically we did pretty much in-house with volunteers and with assistance from a couple of experts in the field.
Okay. Okay, that's all I've got right now. Thank you. I appreciate your insight on how your operation works.
Any other questions? Anything else you wanted to answer? No? Appreciate it. Anybody else here for this item? Anybody else? Entertain a motion to close the floor.
Motion to close the floor.
Second.
Motion by Nicholson, seconded by Burnett. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Any questions for staff? I know, Ryan, you said you had some, Alderman Johnson.
Yeah. Dan, has there been a history of the city of Green Bay? It sounds like they've always gone to fowls, but is there like a history of the city of Green Bay receiving contributions directly from donors that's prompting the need for this agreement?
Well, really what's happened here is since I've been involved as director, I'm checking them, and I'm also the acting superintendent right now. So the checks are coming to me, and as they're coming in, anything written out to the wildlife sanctuary, sometimes those checks are intended for the fowls, and people don't understand that, and they just write wildlife sanctuary. So I just saw a need to actually just clarify it. And I just felt that I needed some approval from the city council in order for me to transfer those checks over to the fowls, is what I'm looking for.
So when you say sometimes those checks are for the fowls, is that then implying that sometimes people are writing checks to the city of Green Bay?
I've never gotten a check to the city of Green Bay. It's always to the wildlife sanctuary or the fowls or the guild. And people don't necessarily understand the difference between the sanctuary and the fowls all the time. And so by allowing this agreement to go through, we don't have to call up everybody who gives a check to the city and ask them, did you intend it to go to the wildlife sanctuary or did you intend it to go to the fowls? So by going through this step or this process, we wouldn't have to go through that step.
Okay, do we have agreements similar to this with other foundations that support city parks like Baird Creek, Bay
No,
Beach?
This is a little bit different situation than all the other ones. With the Friends of Bay Beach, Ever since they formed, they had their own mailing address. They don't have any volunteers working at the site. That's one of the problems we have is, the Guild, they're a very active donor group, so they're actually volunteering on site, helping with animal rehab and stuff. So sometimes when people write out a check, they think it's just to the sanctuary when really they intended it to go to the Guild or something like that.
And I
But
guess
it's
I'm
a-
not sure how the volunteer thing matters. I mean, if you're, the way an organization recruits its volunteers would be totally separate from how it cultivates donors, so.
Correct, but some of the donors are also Fowls or Guild members, which just adds a little complication. And, historically, it's just how it's always happened. A donation came in from whatever manner or mechanism, and it was always just transferred to the Fowls, which worked in this situation. And so to try and separate them out, it would be difficult, and we would have to contact a lot of the people who donate and ask them, well, really, what are your intentions? And explain to them how, the Guild and the Fowls are different from the Wildlife Sanctuary. We're a government agency. It just gets complicated.
So, in the past, when we've received those contributions, nothing has ever come to the city.
No, not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any check coming to the city of Green Bay intended for the sanctuary. It just says Wildlife Sanctuary.
Okay, so really the need is to distinguish the difference between the Wildlife Sanctuary and the Guild.
Correct, and the Fowls.
Okay. So the city has, I guess, no authority over the Fowls because it is its own independent organization, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I guess I'm just curious why we need this level of oversight over what they're doing. Why do we need to know how much they're securing in donations?
We just need to know I think if you read this over, you'll see that it's really just for the checks that come in written to the Wildlife Sanctuary. So we're asking for a little bit more documentation on the checks that are written out to the Wildlife Sanctuary than we are for the other checks that go directly to the Fowls.
Okay. It's just, again, I've been a part of other foundations that have supported organizations. I've never seen this level of oversight before. And that's what's causing me a little bit of pause and why I'm asking some questions. Usually I've seen agreements that pertain specifically to the operation, but not necessarily how an organization might manage its donor pool and the way that donations come in, because that's really the responsibility of that organization and not necessarily of the city. And I just think that sometimes this can be something that can draw red flags with donors. And my pause for concern with all of this is at the end of the day, is I'm really trying to make sure that we're protecting donors for the organization and not giving anybody pause for concern. Because one of the other things that I read this is if ever the agreement is in default, and just please correct me if I'm misinterpreting this, that if the agreement ever goes into default, that those donations all must now be rerouted to the city.
Well, that would be if the donor group, or if the Fowls actually ceases to exist.
But that's different than defaulting on an agreement.
What page?
And the agreement being that maybe they don't give you a report on time. I'm looking for it, Dan. It's slow loading.
That's fine. I don't recall that language being written in that manner. I think the intent of that was if the group ceased to exist. Mr. Spielman may have something to add to this if you want to open the floor again. It's up to you.
Without objection, I'll open the floor. Okay.
Yeah, that'll give me a second to locate this
Sure.
too.
Mr. Spielman, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, our position is that let's assume that we end the agreement for whatever reason, we default and we decide not to, then basically all money that comes to the Falls would basically, we would not be disclosing anything, would still be coming to us. So any checks made, which is the majority of the checks are made out to the Falls, not to the Wildlife Sanctuary. It's a few that basically that have occurred because, as Dan said, people don't necessarily understand the distinction we have a couple donors to the capital campaign who wrote the check to the wildlife sanctuary. Well, obviously, if we end an agreement, we would contact those people and say, for the future, you need to basically make the check payable to the Falls. And we could do that, but we thought that the agreement was reasonable, and that basically, since the city with our liaison gets this information pretty much anyway, it wasn't a problem, and that we could basically go forward. I think we're acting in good faith, and I think the city is as well.
Okay.
Questions for Mr. Spillman? Thanks, sir.
Motion to close the floor.
All right, motion by Alderman Johnson, second by Alderman Burnett to close the floor. Those in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carried.
Okay. So Dan, I'm just looking under page 2, termination, number A. It's on the bottom of the page. And I maybe just misread this, but I also think it doesn't reflect what you had indicated either, which is if the agreement terminates or defaults, that funds directed to the city would be returned to the city by Fowles. So that would mean if somebody wrote a check, I presume, to the city of Green Bay, that the Fowles would no longer deposit it, and it would now be directed to the city to be deposited. I mean, I would think, this type of agreement, I'm no lawyer, but I don't think an agreement like this could trump the dissolution terms that would exist within the Fowles bylaws. So, if the Fowles ceases to exist, I would imagine the proper protocol is going to be whatever funds they have follow their dissolution procedures, not this agreement.
Yeah, I can get a clarification from Vanessa for you on that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I just want to make sure that donors' intentions are being honored, and that, quite frankly, I just want to make sure that this money, if somebody writes a check to the wildlife sanctuary with the expectation that it's being managed by the nonprofit organization, that it's not going into a city account to disappear into a black hole. That's ultimately where my concern comes in.
Okay.
But if President of the Fowles doesn't feel like that's a concern, if staff doesn't feel like that's a concern, I'm content as well, but I didn't feel satisfied without at least expressing that concern.
Sure.
We're comfortable.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions, or otherwise I'll entertain a motion?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Burnett, second by Alderman Nicholson to approve. Under discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. This goes to council next week, Tuesday. Number 2 is consideration with possible action on the request to install pickleball courts on the west side of Green Bay. Director.
Yeah, so this was discussed at a previous park committee, and at the time, the committee directed staff to select a location for the proposed courts and develop a plan along with a cost estimate. So we did work closely with the user group to select the location and determine the optimal court dimensions to accommodate tournament play for a pickleball tournament. So at this point, staff is recommending to convert the 2 existing tennis courts at Murphy Park into 6 dedicated pickleball courts. So in 2018, 2 new tennis courts were constructed at Perkins Park, which is just a few blocks down the road. So we really don't have a need for that many tennis courts that close to each other. In addition, there is adequate parking at Murphy Park, and there's a nice shelter with enclosed restrooms there to accommodate a tournament that happens. The existing tennis courts are in fairly good condition. So the question is, do we renovate the courts or do we replace them with something new? It would be difficult to have optimal tournament play pickleball courts with the dimensions of the existing 2 tennis courts. You would need a little bit more paving on either side basically on all 4 sides in order to accommodate optimal tournament play standards. And also the jointing doesn't really work out with the existing tennis courts because you'd have a major construction joint down the middle of the 2 middle pickleball courts, which doesn't work. So in this situation, what we would recommend is basically the removal of the tennis courts. You leave the base in place, and then you repave it and recolor coat it. So the cost to do that would be $250,000, which is approximately the same cost of installing 2 new tennis courts. I have spoken to the pickleball groups because one question that came up at the last park committee was how much, if any, do they want to fundraise for this project. So at this point, they felt confident that they could fundraise $10,000 towards it. So that would mean the city would have to bond $240,000 for this facility. We recently put our CIP plan together, which is going to be presented at and approved at our budget meeting this year. Because now we're going to be doing the CIP plan and approve that at the same time as the budget. So we've already submitted our plan to the finance department. The city or the parks department did not put $240,000 into the bond request for 2020. So if that's something that the committee and the council wanted to do, we would have to add to the park department's bond request by $240,000. So I know Alderman Stoyer has been very instrumental and had a lot of discussions with the pickleball group as part of this planning process. So he may have something to add to this.
Thank you, Chair.
Alderman Stoyer.
Thank you all. I have met with the pickleball group, and there's a couple things here. First of all, Dan, do you have a diagram? Do they have a diagram?
It's in the agenda packet.
In the agenda packet, okay.
You can see it.
All right.
For talking.
Right. We looked at a number of different parks for this. There's a couple things going on here. This group of pickleball players, there's about 80 to 100 in the city of Green Bay right now. And right now they're looking for facilities, and these are folks anywhere from the age of 8 all the way up to 88. You know, it's generally little older crowd. And they have a park over at Fort Howard Park in Ashwaubenon, which is considered the gold standard right now. In Green Bay, we have on the east side, we've got Edison Park, and not the best, most convenient bathroom facilities, but they do have some over there. The talk is that this sport is growing exponentially in the country, especially in the South. If you look anywhere, they've got tournaments with pickleball in it, and in some respects, it is one of the fastest growing sports in the country. So one of the things I look at when I look at our city parks over time is like, are we getting the best use of our parks with what we have? And we've gone through phases where a lot of softball. Well, there's maybe not as much softball, so maybe we could convert something. Right now, tennis, is fairly expensive sport to get involved in, and we were looking on the west side, and we initially started with Murphy Park. We wanted to do that, but then we looked at Perkins Park, and we thought there'd be a lot more room. But it's not as roomy as we looked. And Dan's been very, very good about sitting down with us, probably 4 or 5 times, looking at various plans. So I guess what I'm trying to say here, I think the question is now we got the bonding coming up. And, I'm wide open on this. I realize anytime you bond for something, that's just more monies that we have to look at and take care of. I feel that this sport would be an economic development boost, especially for the west side, but for the city of Green Bay. The folks that do come in are generally a little older, they're retired, they spend money. A lot of the sports that we have in town here are user sports, so you might have Little League, you've got soccer, you got that type of thing. And the folks may come in with their food, their drink, what have you, and they may not spend as much money, but the pickleball crowd that would be coming around would be spending some money. So we've looked at Military Avenue, for example, and we're looking at the fact that you've got three or four stores that are out right now. So I think it could be a boon for that area and also for the city. So I asked the pickleball group if they would like me to go ahead and ask for to be put in the bond request this year. I'm wide open to the committee to talk on this. They mentioned that they would like to move ahead with this. So if it means that the seed is planted, we put it in for the bond request, but then they decide, well, maybe next year. Maybe we could do it this year. So with that being said, on behalf of this pickleball group, I am going to request that we try to get it in the bond for this year. I realize $240,000 is a lot of money, and we have a lot of other things to look at, but whether we do it this year or next year, the request would come forward probably next year as well. The group will go out and raise $10,000, and there may be more coming. They've talked about that as well. I feel it's a positive for the city. One of the talks that this group has had is they said that they could have regional tournaments here. They would like Wisconsin to be the pickleball mecca for the state of Wisconsin. And you would be drawing from all over the state as well as all over the Midwest for tournaments. And it would be a money-making venture for the city. Do you have any questions? Otherwise, that's what I've got.
Any questions? Thank you, Mark.
There is room for expansion at this park if there ever is a need to add more. You can easily expand to the east, which is another positive of this location.
Is anybody else here for this item? Anybody else? Director, other projects around the city, like Little League Baseball, what do they put towards new facilities, if anything?
It depends on the project.
Yeah.
I know typically we haven't done a lot of major, large projects like that where we renovated an entire field. Usually what happens with the Little League groups and the baseball groups is they come in after the fact and improve a field. So they'll put in batting cages, or they'll put in covered dugouts, or, just put in some, the nice fencing topper on the outfield fence, or they'll do scoreboards. So they usually don't get involved with the initial construction. It's always kind of adding to it and improving it.
Questions for staff, Alderman Johnson?
Maybe just a comment. I think economic boon would be a tough one to defend, Mark, but I appreciate the appeal. But the one thing I would corroborate, though, is that pickleball is a growing sport. And I've seen a lot of data on this in terms of its growth and popularity. And I think Parks Department needs to be just as receptive as any other department when it comes to new trends that are emerging in our community when you see demand from residents to use a certain type of facility. So the one thing I'm maybe struggling with a little bit on this process, and so I think it's one of those things where as a committee we could easily say, sure, we'll put it in the request, but that's acknowledging that when it comes time to debate the budget and the bond requests, any member of this committee or the council at that time could choose to say it's not a priority. So to me, it seems easy to say, yeah, we'll throw it in there and consider it, but decide later if it's something that, that rises to the top. But if there's something I'm misunderstanding about the process, I'm certainly open to what other alders have to share.
I think in general, I think you're correct. I mean, it's a growing sport. We do see that trend. We're getting a lot of other calls from neighboring communities. So it's something that we could use more of these in the parks. But, as you know, we have other demands and other things going on in the parks also. So it's tough to pick and choose.
And it didn't make your list, right?
It did not make my list for 2020.
Is that because the request wasn't there when you were considering your list, or because it wasn't a priority from your perspective?
I would say a combination of both. So I wouldn't say it wasn't a priority. I would say, our bond request is pretty minimal. And I think this year we asked for 1.1 million in our bond request. Last year we got even less than that. And what we requested were projects that we've been talking about for years, or things that really need to be really just improved and fixed. So this was something new that came up as far as this request, and where some of the other ones we've been talking about for a number of years. But I would say there is a demand for it, so in all fairness.
Anybody else? Alderman LaFave?
I know several people who are playing pickleball, acquaintances that I know, and they told me other people, there's a lot that do play this, but they're playing at private facilities. So this is something that, private, they're doing it. Maybe something that really the park should get into, because there must be a reason that private would be doing this. There must be some money that they're, they're getting from it, but also, you know, I don't know, because it's growing so much, I think too, that do we want to lose out on some of that? I don't know.
Thank you. Well, what are your wishes? I don't want to bring Alderman Nicholson, go ahead.
Okay, it's popular. I mean, what kind of revenue, any projections, what the revenue might be brought in? I mean, people are gonna spend money.
Well, in this
There's
case,
a lot of information out there, but I'd like
In
to
this
see
case-
something on paper.
Yeah, in this case, it's in the military district, so the hope would be people would go to the restaurants and shop there along Military Avenue. I don't know if we have any statistics. I know probably the pickleball national groups might have some statistics on that, but it's really more localized, and it'd be tough for us to pull that together.
But I think, Andy, I know what you're saying on that. I mean, there's really
How do we
not a whole
know?
lot to draw from here because we don't really have it. We have a little bit of it. But some of that data could be gathered from Phoenix or Miami or some of these other cities that have it. And to see what, you know, maybe that was a poor choice of words when I said economic development, economic
Well, I mean, where are they gonna
boost.
spend their money?
We could
McDonald's?
paint broad brushes on that, but
I mean,
I'm thinking if you have a regional tournament, anyway.
Shopko's gonna
I'll finish when
open
you're
up.
done. I'll finish
All
when you're done. But that there's possibilities for monies to come in. And like I said, we don't have those numbers now because we don't have it, per se.
So you build it, they will come.
Yeah, they will. They will, Andy.
All right.
I guess I'll just comment, the
I
only information I had from me here would be, we do have an active East Side Pickleball group that, they go there pretty much nightly and they play, and then they also run 2 pickleball leagues with us, so we collaborate on 2 pickleball tournaments. And the one pickleball tournament in July sells out, and the one we just had on Tuesday this week, yesterday, sells out also. So, I mean, we go for 2 days, they play multiple games throughout the weekend, and 75 teams come, and they're from all over the place. This last one, most of the teams were from the Fox Valley area. Like over half the teams were actually from like Appleton. So it does bring people into Green Bay.
So we're
To
going
what
to develop
extent?
the East Town Mall pretty soon now?
Well, I was just going to comment. I mean, one difficulty or concern that we do have is these are outdoor courts again. So it is very weather
Let's
dependent.
bring it there.
You know, we could look at some other things to do, like go inside, you know, the gymnasiums of the schools during the off season and try some other pickleball stuff to build the sport and figure out, you know, whether or not this is a good idea or not in the future. But
Alderman Burnett.
Yeah, it's actually a great idea. I mean, see if we can collaborate with some of the schools' indoor facilities, because I remember the only time I played pickleball was in high school, you know, indoors in our school, so that might be a possibility as a way to not deny this idea, because I'm not comfortable bonding that amount this year. I mean, we just don't have enough. Last thing I want the Parks Department to be, you know, overzealous in doing something if the demand is not there. I think we all need to make sure the demand is there, so that might be a great way to put the feelers out there in the community to see if they'd be interested in having this in a school, high school or something like that.
Now, just speaking, and I don't want to put this group through what the pool groups had to go through, of course. That was a much bigger project, but the council required that the $1 million be raised first, and then come back, and then proceed, other than the other way around. And 10,000 is, what, 4% of the project? And I think that the pool group is 15% or something like that, so maybe we need to make the goal a little bigger, and kind of light the fire under there to build that, and then come back, because
Get an extra year to do it.
yeah. I mean, I'd love to throw money at every park project, believe me, but
Like I said, I'm fine with the committee. I'm bringing this forward from the group. So I
Excited.
understand the dynamics.
if we had another $250,000, I'm sure there's a couple projects that are sitting out there that we've been sitting on for a couple years, I imagine, right? You know, Colburn can use something. East Colburn, I should say. Alder LaFave?
I think the idea of collaborating with the schools, maybe that's what you should look at. Try to, you know, get more interest that way, get them in there. I know in the summer they'd like to be outside, But this is something that, and build it up more, get more people interested in doing it. Like you said, and then see next year if you have money or something that you could, build a park there. But yeah, right now, it's,
Alderman Stoyer.
Yeah,
then
that's a
Alderman
good
Johnson.
point, but, one of the things too is that, you look at the way they paint the stripes and all that good stuff. It's a little different than some of the other courts. So would that cause any undue problem inside of a school? It would be temporary, I would think. Putting the stripes, I don't know. It's just a different setup.
Thank you, Alderman Stoyer. Alderman Johnson?
I'm just gonna make a motion. I'm gonna move that we refer this to staff. I'm gonna add a couple of maybe directives on there. One is to, per Alder Burnett's suggestion, reach out to some schools, see if there's some interest there. And the other one is to work directly with the pickleball group to see if we can help them craft a plan to get their total contribution up to 10% or $25,000, and then, have this idea come back up for the next year's bond request, since this year's is already kind of submitted or figured out.
Your second to that?
Second.
Second by Alderman Nicholson. Discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. It's a step forward. All right. Number 3, consideration with possible action on the request by Alderperson LaFave that due to safety concerns brought to her attention, she's requesting that Bay Beach hire a security officer during hours of operation with the cost coming from Bay Beach profits account. Alder LaFave.
yeah, my neighbor knows there's been drug dealing going on at Bay Beach. This was this spring. The playground equipment was there. Park wasn't officially the rides. I think it might have been on weekends. They saw kids. They figured they were in high school. They figured they were more adults. They're walking around with their hoods up and walking like this. And if you walk up by them, they would make sure you didn't see their face. Car comes along. They got up. They walked over towards the car. The car leaves. 10 minutes later, the car comes back 3 times. Drug dealing's going on over there. We have to protect this park. And also, when people are there, when it's in operation, with the way things are going today, it's just, people are too fast to take offense, and who knows, what. I think we need somebody there that has authority. They have to be trained, well-trained. It can't be you just hire somebody who walks around with a walkie-talkie. They have to be able to carry a gun, real security. And I think this is really needed in the park. Because also, the police don't have time. They're not coming through the park like they should be after hours. People are there in the park way after the park's closed. I've had, not this year, but I've had already, and I walked over there and yelled at the person, please stop shooting fireworks off till 2 o'clock in the morning in the park. So people are there after hours. Who knows what they're doing? In that first house, I know they wanted to get out because they were robbed 3 times. Because the police don't come around. My neighbors also be called because we had a weird situation. It took the cops an hour to come. This guy was having a stroke. We didn't realize it. It was weird. I can't go through the thing. But it took forever for the police to come. So we have to protect this park. We got to protect people in this park. I also know that there's been problems with kids coming in, the older kids, very rowdy. My neighbor, another friend down the street, she said they were pushing through the lines and everything. Surprised that somebody didn't really get mad and start a fight. So I think, temper's fair today, easy.
Alderman Johnson?
Yeah.
Question?
So, several of the anecdotes you gave there really didn't have anything to do with the park or when the park's closed. So my question is, are you here because we need security for the park, or because we need to have better response time from the police department?
Actually,
in
we
which
need
case
both.
it should
We
be
need
elsewhere.
both. We need both. We need both, actually. We need after hours, we need the police to go through and make sure by 10 o'clock that people are out, and then early in the morning before the park starts. And then also we need security there. When they used to, a long time ago, There used to be a gentleman, I don't know if he was just hired as security, he used to walk around all the time. And people knew he was there. And I think just the presence at that time of somebody with some authority like that walking through the park, we didn't have all kinds of problems. It's after we got rid of them, and then we had all the problems with the teenagers. With the
What
dances.
problems?
The dances, they had to close them. It got really bad. They finally closed down the dances. That was, how many years ago?
Probably about 8 or 9 years ago.
Oh, you're talking
Yeah.
about teen night?
Yes, yeah. There never
Wow.
used to be a lot of, it just got worse and worse over the years. Okay, but during operations, no, the one is during operations. I mean, you've got people coming in from outside the city, not just saying they're always gonna cause problems, but you got these older kids come in, and they're bussed in from the school districts. They come in, and she thought she left.
Alderman LaFave, you have a
Okay.
question, Alderman Nicholson?
Well, I have many questions. You're bringing up a lot of, well, you said there's drug dealing at one time, 3 times. Anybody call the police?
No, he didn't
Okay.
after, because, yeah, he left.
How do you know it was drug dealing? Did you see
Oh.
the actual drugs?
No, but he
Okay.
could tell, the way the kids were, they
Now,
didn't want you to see them,
when-
their faces.
When you
in
say
the
we're
car.
gonna have to have someone to carry a gun, the only person that can really have the authority to enforce the laws who can carry a gun is a policeman. So you just can't give a security guard a gun. He doesn't have the authority to do that, or we're gonna have some liability problems. So do you wanna hire another officer? Would probably have to hire 3, 4, 5 officers, rotating shifts for anybody to have a gun in the park to enforce laws.
Because I had
Did
someone
you know
tell,
that?
I had somebody tell me that if they don't have a gun, people are just going to say, well. But
Well,
to
we're
me,
gonna
I don't
have
know,
to have
that's
at
why I
least
brought it
5
up.
officers to basically patrol, because they need days off.
Right.
And they're gonna have to be, depending on what shift they're on, so we'd have to consider that. Now, the gentleman with the stroke, did anybody call the fire department? That's who would probably wanna,
Well, we didn't know.
okay.
No, I'm saying, we didn't know what was going on, but we found out after.
And then you're saying
But
kids are busted by the
response.
school district. Well, maybe we should talk to the school district to see why are we busing kids in?
Oh, they do that all the time, they've done that for years.
Oh, you mean to have like a party?
No.
Bus kids in to do what? Spend money and go on the rides?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how we're gonna stop that.
No, I didn't say to
And then the
stop
older
it. I didn't
kids-
say to stop that.
Well, that, I guess, if we're trying to have some type of security and you're bringing in busing in kids, I mean, I don't know, isn't that what Bay Beach is for? And older kids, what age group are the older kids, Kathy? I mean, I'm just trying to clarify everything you're saying.
Teenagers.
Teenagers, well,
Yeah, yeah.
teenagers, you know, they're allowed to go.
I'm not
Dan,
saying
can you,
that.
I mean, help us with some of this? I mean,
Well, one thing at a time here, if I could, I'm gonna.
I don't know, I got a list
Obviously,
of-
and you, Mr. Arnoldi, too. Alderman Burnett, did you have a question for Kathy?
Well, more of a comment and then we'll continue.
Yeah.
But Kathy, I don't want to discount what you're saying. You live out there, you might get more calls for the fact you represent it. But I have been to Bay Beach just this year 5 or 6 times, different times, weekends, early, late at night, right before it closed a few times. And I'll be honest, I have never, not just this year, but any other time, even teen night, when I was a teen, I'd go. I never felt threat there, like at all. I mean, you
He was part
basically,
of the problem, that's
Yeah.
why they.
well, you basically have the entire community there, and I've never really experienced. I mean, maybe I'm being naive, but I've never experienced anything remotely threatening. And I have 3 kids, small kids, 4 kids, but 3 small kids. Safety is the utmost concern I have as a father. Never have I felt anything. So I don't want to discount what you're saying. I just don't see it. I don't feel it when I'm there.
Alderman LaFave?
There must have
Anything
been
from staff?
reason. Yeah, okay, let
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, so basically, you know, the police, historically, the police have been very good when we have issues. We contact them, and they'll come out and take care of the situation if they need to. If we have a problem at night or things are happening, we just call them up and we ask them to do extra patrols out there. We don't just do that for Bay Beach Amusement Park, we do that for all of our parks, and they're really good about doing that. whenever there's an ongoing issue or an issue that happens, that's happened multiple times. So, you know, again, you know, Jason can, if you have questions for him, he can kind of talk about how we deal with it as a staff when the police aren't there during hours of operation. But it comes down to, with this request, are you looking at just having security out there while we're in operation, or is it literally full-time year-round? I mean, those are kind of two different topics.
Right, no, they're in operations. You need, I mean,
I guess Jason, why
the
don't you
person
want to
should
come up?
be a gun, but I just want somebody with some help, some,
All right,
you know.
let's hear from the head of Bay Beach, Mr. Arnoldi.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's a very safe park, and we're very fortunate that everyone respects the park. You know, there are incidents that happen once in a while, mainly minor. We've never had a real major incident out there, and the police are usually pretty good to respond, depending on what else is going on in the city as well. We do have supervisors going throughout the park to help anybody that might need it. But when it comes to any kind of breaking of laws, and obviously or safety concern with something like that, then we obviously call the police. But
Do you see a need for security guard? Has it been in any discussions? or
I think
plans, or-
from where we sit, when we have, for instance, an event like Kids Day, we ask for an increased patrol. If we know that something's coming up, we ask for
Of the police department?
Of the police department.
Okay.
And I think, speaking to what you were saying, I think that's probably the only way this works, to have security from a security company. It might not work as well. Going back to the authority point that you made as well. So I think there is something to be said for certain times of the day, maybe on weekends, to have possible more of a community officer in that area once in a while. Presence makes a big difference, but as far as all the operational hours, I'm not sure that's completely necessary at this time, but
Alderman Nicholson?
Jason, how often do the supervisors walk around?
all day long.
All day long? I mean, on the perimeter, like what Kathy was saying?
I mean, obviously it's a big park, so they can't be everywhere, but they'll walk through the midway. They'll be in the midway. They have rangers
Okay,
that go around
good.
the park and the
Perfect.
parking lots to make sure that no cars are being messed with as well as we can.
Good.
But again, too, they're college students, so you know their authority can be limited as well. So.
Yeah, but they have a radio, right?
They have radio and direct contact with the police department if they need it. So.
Perfect.
Any other
And they're
questions?
trained. They're trained to respond if they
Correct.
see something,
Correct.
okay?
Any other questions for Kathy or Mr. Arnoldi? Go ahead. Just
Do you have any type of history of criminal activity going on at the park? I mean,
No.
numbers wise,
No, we don't. I mean, in
or
a
is it
given-
just non-existent?
It's. I mean, it's on a case by case basis. Obviously, I don't see any kind of. I mean, in the late '90s, I would say it was worse.
I'm not looking that far back. I'm
Yeah.
looking now, right? I mean, other than seeing a kid walk by in a hood, do we actually have any numbers of like criminal activity where police have had to come and?
No, we might.
Arrest somebody.
If we call the police, it's usually for maybe a fight between middle schoolers,
Mhm.
something along those lines.
Does that happen frequently?
Maybe a dozen times a year, at most.
Okay.
Is about how often we call the police. So,
Do you feel the public is at risk at any time when that type
I
of
don't.
activity happens?
no, I don't.
You know, too, when you're gonna do more.
Any other questions?
with
Alder-
the-
Alderperson
I'll make a
LaFave,
motion.
1 second. Any other questions for
No.
anyone here? Anybody else here for this item? No? Okay. Did you have something
I
else?
just wanted to
Alderman LaFave?
mention too, you know, we're gonna put a beach in and that, so you're gonna draw more and more people. I'm just saying, you know, my neighbors were concerned, because they saw, you know, a couple things going on, reported it to me, and, you know, they just think that this is, I've had a couple of them, they go to other parks, big parks, and you have to go through a gate. It's not open. You have to go through gates, you know, they check you,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
it's-
Bay Beach is a unique situation, being a
Yeah.
city park that happens to have
Just
rights.
open, yeah,
So,
yeah,
it is
yeah,
a unique
right, right.
situation.
And they just, you know, thought that,
Okay.
you know.
Do you have any police
times-
call data with you? Did you request that at all? That might be something worth looking into. Request the
No,
last
and I
change.
didn't hear about the drug thing until a while after
I'll
from my
look into that.
neighbors, so I did report it to the police, and they said, oh, they didn't
All
know.
right.
So,
Well, I asked about that, and you said they did not call the police with the drug deal.
they didn't,
They didn't, you did.
yes.
Okay.
After I found out about it.
Okay.
It was like
All
more than
right.
a month later, so, and then I did talk to the police about it.
All right,
Motion to receive and place on file.
second.
All right, there's a motion by Alderman Brunette, second by Alderman Nicholson to receive and place on file. Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
I still would like
Hey,
to
Jim.
talk a little bit more
Jim.
about it and just,
I would go and get.
I have some
data, talk to
residents
police.
coming to INS, and I sent them the 310. Could someone run up there and see if anybody's, thank you,
Take some steps.
because I don't see them down here, so I'm guessing they're there.
All right, number 4, consideration with possible action.
Where is it?
Apologies, anybody here for improvement services. We're finishing up our Parks Committee, and then your committee will start right after. They had a few things active. Okay, number 4.
Rentals, but yeah, 327 Ashland, but it was actually 325.
Sir, is this something, are you here for the Improvement Service Committee?
Yeah, we just.
That'll be the
that committee
next
hasn't
meeting.
started
We're
yet.
finishing up our Parks Committee,
Oh.
and then we'll take up all the
I didn't
items under
know.
Improvement Services, yeah. We're running a little longer than we thought. We had a little more robust discussion than we anticipated. Number 4 is consideration with possible action on the approval of the revocable private transmission facilities permit with Brown County to install fiber optic cable through Joannes Park at East High School.
So an engineering consultant approached the city on behalf of Brown County and proposed a fiber optic cable installation through Joannes Park to secure a permanent internet connection for East High School. So the proposed cable would come out of the building on the east side of East High, go towards the river, and then once it hits our riverfront trail, it would head south, and it would follow the trail south. There are maps in the agenda packet if you want to look at that, along with the agreement. And then it would end at Kurtz Avenue, which is just south of Joannes Stadium, and that's where it would tie into an existing fiber optic line. So we are supportive of this request. The fiber optic lines would be bored underground. No trees, walks, or asphalt parking lots would be damaged during the installation. We did discuss this with Public Works, as the fiber optic line will also be going through part of the right-of-way and in Kurtz Avenue, and will cross several major utilities. Public Works has indicated that they're supportive of this request. And what they are recommending is what DPW is recommending is instead of doing an easement for this project, Public Works did draft an amendment to an existing revocable private transmission facility permits. So all other fiber optics that were installed by the county were done through this existing permit. So this would just be an amendment to that permit. So we do have somebody here from the consulting firm if you have any specific questions for him.
Committee, any questions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Nicholson, second by Alderman Johnson to approve. Any discussion on this? Those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried. All right, thank you for coming. You don't have to go. Stay for All right. Consideration with possible, number 5, consideration with possible action on accepting a possible 27.33 acre property donation of parcels 27379, 21385, 21386, 21387 from the Beard Creek Preservation Foundation located in the Beard Creek Greenway.
And there is a map in your agenda packet if you want a page to that. But throughout the years, the Bear Creek Preservation Foundation has teamed up with the city on numerous occasions to purchase property in the Greenway. They also do trail maintenance, and they also do various native preservation projects throughout the Greenway. So they did approach us about a month or two ago and indicated that they were in discussions with the family of the owner of these parcels. So it's one family that owns all of them to purchase 27.33 acres of the Greenway, and it's just west of Huron Road. The foundation did apply for a DNR grant to assist with the acquisition costs of purchasing the property. So the desire is the Preservation Foundation would like to purchase the property using the grant dollars and donations that they receive, and then actually donate it to the city at no cost. They have really no interest in being long-term owners of the property. So this 27 acres is split through the middle by an active railroad right-of-way. Property to the south is heavily wooded and is adjacent to some existing residential. And the property to the north is mainly agricultural fields with wooded areas around the perimeter. If you look at our outdoor rec plan, you will see that the property is shown as a proposed future greenway in our Parks, Recreation, and Open Space plan. So this acquisition is consistent with our long-range plan for that area. So the DNR is currently in the process of reviewing the grant application from the Bear Creek Preservation Foundation. And they'd like to know for sure if the city is committed to accepting the donation of the property before they decide on awarding the grant. So from a staff standpoint, I would be in support of accepting the donation. There are just a couple of stipulations that the DNR would put on this property that we would have to follow if this ends up being a successful transaction. So they would require that the property be maintained permanently as undeveloped open space. So we wouldn't be able to put a parking lot in there, we wouldn't be able to put an open shelter in there, we couldn't sell it off for residential. It just has to remain as permanent open space, which is consistent with that area of what we would do with that if the park owned the greenway there. The other stipulation they would have is they would require the removal of the invasive buckthorn on the southern property. And the Bear Creek Preservation Foundation is well equipped to do that for the city using volunteers, and they have agreed to do that in this situation. So at no cost to the city, so that'll be kind of ongoing with them. The only other thing that still is kind of up in the air is what we would do is before we would accept the final donation, we would do a quick environmental analysis to make sure that there's no contamination on site, because that hasn't been done yet. So we would do that, and I guess what I would recommend, if you're willing to, is approve this contingent upon the successful purchase by the foundation, and then an environmental review is done for the property before accepting the donation. And if we find anything substantial in that environmental review, we'll then bring it back for reconsideration.
Thank you, Director. Any questions from committee? Alderman Johnson?
What type of long-term maintenance costs do you see the city incurring on this property?
The only thing that the city wouldn't incur anything. Basically, the only maintenance that's really involved, because this will be, like I said, this will be kind of an undisturbed natural area. So long-term, it's just going to be the removal of the buckthorn, which the donor group is willing to do for the city. Other than that, it's just a greenway that's left natural.
Paying taxes right now?
Right now, they are, correct. It would not be if the city accepted the donation.
How many taxes is it?
I did not look that up. I can have that for you by council if you're interested. But keep in mind,
Is it
it's
significant?
undeveloped. Well, it's all undevelopable land for the most part. Maybe the property to the north might be appraised or assessed a little bit higher than the property to the south. Property to the south is 100% undevelopable.
It's in alignment with the long-term plan over there.
It's, yeah, with the long-term plan that's been in place for many, many years.
I would move to accept with that contingency that it passes successfully in environmental examination.
Second. Motion by Alderman Johnson, second by Alderman Burnett, as stated. Under discussion, those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. For those who just came in, we're finishing up the Parks Committee, and then we'll roll right into the Improvement Service Committee. So only have a few items left. Where else would you rather be?
Hurry it out. Laughs on that one.
Wait for something. Come on, help me out. All right. Number 6, consideration with possible action on the approval of a revocable permit with Green Bay Riverside Unit Owners Association, Inc. to allow the construction of a staircase adjacent to the Fox River Trail on parcel 12431.
So the owner of this parcel contacted the city with a desire to construct an access walk from their outdoor deck to the Fox River Trail. So in order to make that connection, they would have to build a staircase to handle the grade elevations between the trail and their outdoor deck, which is on private property. So all of the costs for the trail connection and the staircase would be the responsibility of the property owner. They will also be responsible to repair any construction damage to the greenway or the trail. If this is approved, they would like to begin construction fairly quickly and make that connection yet this year. As a staff, we are supportive of this agreement. Public Works did put this initial draft together of this agreement, and really, I don't think any of us have any concerns with this.
Questions from the committee? Entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Alderman Nicholson, second by Alderman Burnett. Discussion. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And number 7, consideration with possible action on the request by Alderman Burnett to relocate the annual Kitty Carnival effective 2020 to other city parks, possibly Colbert. Alderman Burnett.
I came up with this thought for years, and I know perhaps, I don't know the history, Dan, other than conversations you and I had, but I know that the past mayor really wanted to increase the number of activity in the downtown area, which is a noble goal, but in my opinion, locating the King Carnival downtown is not the most desirable place in ways of traffic. It's kind of, in my opinion, an unsafe environment. There's quite a bit of police presence that's required there to direct traffic. And I noticed this year, I don't know whose decision this was, but there was another event there. I think maybe that increased the amount of traffic in the area, an event that was more geared towards adults. So moving it to a park, if there isn't, well, that was your idea.
That was my event.
Your event. So it works most years, it would have been fine, but with some of the development along Broadway, which you're probably involved in as well, there's less parking, I noticed this year. And so it created more of a logjam this year than in past years. So before going to that event this year, in the past, Colburn Park would be a wonderful facility, especially since we are hopefully going to be opening the pool this year. That's a great way, in my opinion, to increase the awareness in the community towards the swimming pool, to increase the number of users that the pool has. So with that, I'll just turn it back to you.
Well, Director.
Yeah, so I mean, there's pros and cons to having a light park versus other parks and vice versa. So James will kind of go over a few bullet points so that you're kind of informed of the history and why it's there now.
All right, the history of the Kitty Carnival and Parade. Are you guys ready? Everybody got a big crowd out here, so I'm excited. Carnival began in 1947 at Fisk Park, and then it rotated between Fisk and Astor in the 1950s. And then it was held at Joannes Park beginning in 1960 until 2009. We did the carnival at 1 year at Bay Beach in 2010, and then it's been held at Light Park from 2011 until currently this year. So it's only been in really, essentially 4 different parks. And so there's a lot of pros, and so we talked extensively with staff, because there's a lot of logistics that go into a bigger event, and there's a lot of different things we take in consideration when we move to Light Park. One was the parade, because the parade used to go from Joannes down Walnut Street, and then we actually would end at a Veterans Memorial Park, and then that parade would happen one day, and then the next day the carnival would happen. And there's a lot of logistics with 2 days and streets and closures and some complaints we got on that. So we actually combined into 1 day. So that's why we currently do the walking parade, and then we do the carnival the same night. So we do it all the same night. When it comes to moving the Kitty Carnival Parade, essentially, I mean, we can do it wherever, honestly, but it does have a lot more concerns to be addressed if we put it into a neighborhood park that doesn't have maybe a certain amount of electricity that we need, water hookups, different, the space. I don't know if you looked at the space, of course, of the carnival, but it is a pretty large footprint, so putting it on just anywhere, it doesn't really work, too well. Parking, depending on where the location is, we definitely look at our park maintenance crews and all the different prep they have to do. They actually have to get all those stakes and the fencing and everything prepped prior. So it does take into consideration if there's league games in certain areas, or if there's different other events going on. I mean, so Light Park is kind of an open slate, and it works really, really well for actually running this carnival. And over the years, our numbers have actually consistently increased. So in terms of participation, we have never seen a drop. We've actually seen an increase in participation. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it, I guess. And essentially it comes down to what do you want the carnival and parade to look. I personally think it's a great opportunity to look at something with the fact that our Parks Department is also 100 years old next year. So we actually, our Parks Department overall is looking at different special events and different themes and different ways to celebrate our community and our park system next year throughout the year. So I definitely think it can be part of that conversation and what that actually looks like. Is an opportunity to celebrate multiple different things going on. So essentially, I can go through a lot of the pros and cons if you want. I have 2-3 pages. I know people want to hear this here, but I mean, I want to know kind of what are your overall, is it just to put it into a community park, or is it to actually have the most attendance? Typically, I will say when we do move an event this large, you will see a decrease in participation for at least the first year or two until it gets back to where people recognize where it is and the time frame. Now, I do think there is so there's a lot of pros to doing it at Lake Park, but some of the concerns would be the amount of activity at Lake Park. I will say that in a good way, we've seen an uptick in the number of special events and the number of requests for rentals. Sometimes when you have a big thing like tall ships coming in, then we have to move our date for the Kiddie Carnival to a different date to accommodate that other event coming in. There's other events that we collaborate with, which in this case I thought was actually we had nothing but overall nothing but really positive remarks from people that came down to see. A lot of the people that came down, our intention was for them, maybe they have never seen a Kiddie Carnival or maybe a new group of people to come and see what we have going on and raise some awareness for the playground program. That's part of what we do. There's a lot of different ways to look at it, I guess. Right off the bat, though, Joanne's, I know that was brought up last time a little bit when I talked to you, and one of the major concerns with that is the irrigation. That's why it was moved from Joanne's. One of the major reasons why is when we put irrigation in, we couldn't pound the stakes in for the different carnival booths and that thing. So we'd have to totally think about how we would do carnival booths differently.
Yeah, if I say James,
Yeah.
I think I have an idea just to, if the trend line of participation has been going up, I know that moving it to a new location would cause a disruptance in attendance. Maybe the word doesn't get out there. It's such a credible community event, and if the participation is increasing year after year, I don't want to stop the momentum. So if I could, unless the other committee members have an opinion, if I could just make a motion to refer to park staff to come up with 3 other park options that this event could be located to, and then we can continue the discussion at another time.
All right, is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Alderman Nicholson. Discussion, Alderman Johnson.
And actually, Alderman, that's the recommendation I was going to make, was maybe a list of alternative parks that could do this, pros and cons. So I think what your request does honor that. And by the way, it was the Levitt Amp Green Bay Music Series, which is promoted as a family-friendly event. I encourage you to bring your 3 children down.
I was there.
Every Tuesday night.
Perfect.
Any other discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Who seconded that?
I did.
Number 8, consideration with possible action on the request by Alderman Burnett to study and prepare a report on the number of parks, city, county, school, and Oneida owned throughout the 12th district with the purpose of possibly locating property where the city can develop a new park. I thought all of District 12 was a park, personally.
So what I did is, if you look through your agenda packet, you'll see that there's a map and then there's a chart. So the map is actually a map from our Green Bay Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Plan that was revised about 5 years ago. We're looking at a new revision soon. But you'll see on those maps that it shows where all of the existing parks are and where all of the proposed parks are, at least in that plan. And as far as the proposed parks go, I've been with the city for 19 years now. For the most part, the proposed parks in this district haven't changed in the 19 years I've been here, as far as what's being shown graphically on the plan. So, if you look at the chart, it lists the actual parks and the acreages. It does clearly show which ones are City of Green Bay, which ones are Oneida owned, and which ones are school-owned parks. So, I guess for now, this is the information that we were able to pull together without knowing what additional information we were really looking for.
Sure, and Oh, I could share. Dan, this is more than what I was looking for at this point, so I thank you very much. One thing I want you to be aware of, though, the area between Northwest NWTC and, let's just say on the map, Lombardi Middle School, this happens quite often. That's the Three Sisters neighborhood. There's actually a park in there.
Oh,
It's
is there?
not, yeah, there is a park in there, and I think part of the issue when Three Sisters was developed and created, that whole white space, there are actually quite a few streets in there. So I don't know if it's because it's a tribally owned area that it's just not reflective on maps, but that is not a blank area. There are streets that go in and out of there, and there is a tribally owned park there, so you might want to update the map. So if I could just make a motion to refer this back to staff to work with Alderman Burnett on, I want to create more of a narrative to justify increasing the number of parks and develop park areas. So just a motion to refer to staff to work with Alderman
Second.
Burnett.
Motion by Burnett, second by Nicholson. Discussion? Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Informational Director's Report. Almost done.
I'll let James just point out a few things.
Sure, I mean, as you guys know, the summer season for us is starting to come to an end. Playgrounds is finishing up this week. Pools will finish up next week. We've had a great season with both of those, actually. We had a really hot July, which really helped us out. June wasn't so hot, but playgrounds finished out. You saw with the Kitty Carnival Parade, and then this week they celebrate their location. So, Wildlife Sanctuary, actually, so we had 22 summer camps at the Wildlife Sanctuary this summer, all of which were really well attended. We had over 230 kids in summer camps through the course of the summer. And then we just working hard to get through the summer and starting to prepare already for fall and winter. So, but that's really all I have. I mean, just we're happy to, not happy summer's done. We love summer, but, you know.
Motion to receive and place on file.
Second. Motion received and placed on file by Alderman Nicholson, seconded by Alderman Johnson. Colburn construction starts soon, right?
It starts next week.
Awesome. Good. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. The next park committee is tentatively scheduled September 11th, 2018.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Nicholson, second by Alderman Johnson. Those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.
What are they doing in October?
You know.
Maybe I
Renovation.
should apply for a junction.
Renovation, yeah. A demo job, yeah.
Yeah.